College football, don't do it. Don't do it. Do not do it. SEC, I am pleading with you. SEC, Southeastern Conference, Greg Sankey, just back away. Just back away. Don't return any phone calls. Just back away. No text messages to be exchanged. Nothing. Don't consider it. Don't think about it. Just, you're doing just fine. Remember, Greg Sankey, that you often preach that you make moves with not only the SEC in mind, but with the greater good of college football nation in mind. SEC, just back away. Oklahoma, Texas, they are foolish. They don't know what they're doing. Just back away. Welcome, everyone, into the Voice of College Football here on a Wednesday night. Our weekly call-in show, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 Central. Do the math if you're in other time zones, but if you're right here, you don't need to know what time it is. Just know that you can call into the show to talk college football with so much to talk about. Some of it good, some of it very sad, some of it a bit disheartening and disturbing, and some of it like this, a bit confusing and controversial. As we welcome in a number of folks, we hope that you've joined us for a bunch of our recent content. We most recently wrapped up our Florida State live show. That was another good time with Jason Parker and Logan Robinson. Please check it out on our Florida State channel. And then also we had a number of video records that will be released soon. Roster breakdowns, check them out. Ohio State and Michigan featured, along with Alabama, Texas A&M, Clemson, Miami to come, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and others. All right, right here at the Voice of College Football, Florida State roster breakdown, lest I forget the Seminoles and Georgia. SEC and ACC Media Days. They continue today. The ACC kicking off with the Coastal Division coaches and players, and the SEC Day 2 today with the king of college football, Nick Saban, taking the podium. He typically has a message for all of college football, and we will dive into that. And again, some sad news out of Tallahassee to address. But first, we address the rumors that Oklahoma and Texas have reached out to the SEC for membership. Just a couple of years ago, we learned that the University of Texas had been in contact with the SEC concerning membership. All right. So I know about as much about this currently as you do. I've only heard the comments made on social media for the past hour and a half, close to 2 hours now. I've been involved in the Florida State show, so I have not been able to look into this. And then prior to that, I was doing some records, so not able to take a deep look into this. So we will all together look at what's been reported by a number of sources, and I am citing CBS Sports right now. And then our call-in number is 860-499-3332. Please consider using the Super Chat contribution, and also you can hit me up on Cash App, PayPal, and Venmo to bypass YouTube if you'd like to do that. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search MarkRogersTV. All right. This article was written by Adam Silverstein. He writes, as of just about an hour ago, with college football playoff expansion on the horizon and the sport as whole undergoing radical change, another round of conference realignment may be in the horizon. Texas and Oklahoma have reportedly reached out, in quotes, to the SEC about joining the league should the two Big 12 powerhouses choose to leave their home conference. Well, that kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? They would have to leave their home conference to join the SEC. All right, this again was first reported by the Houston Chronicle, citing a high-ranking college official with knowledge of the situation. The Chronicle reports that the SEC could announce the additions of the Longhorns and Sooners within a couple of weeks. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey would not address the report while in attendance at SEC Media Days Wednesday. No comment on that speculation, he told CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd Sankey, who later added, we are only worried about the 2021 season. Somebody dropped a report from unnamed people. Okay. Well, if this turns out to be true, if Oklahoma and Texas have reached out to the SEC, and if the SEC does make a move on this, then Greg Sankey is going to look a little bit foolish for saying that this was speculation, or as he called it here, yes, I will not comment on the speculation. So he said right there that it's speculation. So either he doesn't understand the weight of his words, or it's speculation. Texas and Oklahoma released similar statements refusing to acknowledge the report. Speculation swirls around collegiate athletics. We will not address rumors or speculation, said the Longhorns. The college athletics landscape is shifting constantly. We don't address every anonymous rumor, said the Sooners. Texas A&M athletic director Ross Bjork made it clear to gathered media Wednesday that he wants the Aggies to be the only team from the Lone Star State in the conference. Now that says something right there. So either he knows that something's brewing and he's trying to make a last-minute stand to buffet that and push back and hope that that sways the SEC. So he either knows something's brewing, that this is legit, but he wants to make a stand that Texas A&M wants to be the only school in the SEC from Texas, or he may know that there's really nothing to worry about and that they will continue to be the only school. But for him to clearly come out and say, I want Texas A&M to be the only team from the Lone Star State in the conference. Of course, Texas A&M and Missouri joined 8 years ago in 2012. I have not read the article, said Bjork, again, Texas A&M AD. But if you're asking me to kind of comment on college athletics, it's changing. Okay, we all know that. So what does that look like? I don't know. We want to be the only SEC program in the state of Texas. There's a reason Texas A&M left the Big 12 to stand alone, to have our own identity. That was the complaint, and currently is the complaint secretively among a lot of schools in the Big 12, that they're playing in the shadow of Texas, not on the field in the shadow of Texas, on the field in the shadow of Oklahoma, but financially taking a back seat to Texas. And certainly Texas A&M felt that way and made that measured decision to go to the SEC, which has been, of course, a windfall. All right, let's go to the phone lines and talk with Michigan State fan, I believe. Hello. Yes, how you doing tonight? What's going on?
Extend my thought. I'm supposed to extend my thoughts and condolences and prayers to the Bobby Bowden family. First off.
Yes, well, thank you for that.
Yeah. And if Oklahoma and Texas were to join the SEC, you can get that Texas A&M and Texas rivalry back. I think that's the only reason why Texas would join the SEC, is to get that rivalry back.
You think Texas would join the SEC to get the rivalry back? That would be their main incentive?
I would believe so.
No, I think they want to make money. They want to play in the best conference and the most lucrative conference, and they see where the Big 12 is to a certain extent ignored and devalued by much of the sports landscape. Unless you're a serious college football fan, most people don't pay a whole lot of attention to the Big 12. And I think Texas feels that they're more substantial to the sport than that, and they can also make more money. So understand right now that if you play in the Big 10 or the SEC, you make twice as much money per school than you do if you play in one of the other three conferences.
Yeah.
Money.
Money and maybe that rivalry too has something to do with that as well. I don't know about that.
They can sign a contract.
Do you think that's a rivalry?
Do I think Texas and Texas A&M's a rivalry?
Yeah. Do you think that's another reason why Texas would join? Also,
I don't think that has much to do with it. They can sign a non. They're playing Arkansas this year. They can play Texas A&M, and Texas can play regardless if they want to.
Who's going from Michigan State to the Big Ten Media Days?
I don't know. You can probably look that up.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think Indiana wins the Big Ten East.
They could. They could.
And I seen that prediction video from that Ohio State guy last week, and I think they get Ohio State. I think Ohio State takes a loss to Indiana.
Again, it wouldn't shock me, but I think Indiana is going to have to win a whole lot of other games that they are in jeopardy of losing. I'm not completely sold on Indiana being anything close to Ohio State. But
right.
They took a swipe at them last year, and they came up short, but they played well in the second half, and they got them at home this year.
And if we're doing full capacity stadiums, Ohio State will have a new quarterback on the road. For me, that's a recipe for Indiana to win that game.
I would guess that 30 to 40% of that stadium is going to be Ohio State fans, and that stadium isn't exactly daunting as it is in terms of a road environment, but it is a road environment. And Indiana is a capable football team. They're capable of beating Ohio State. Are they in any way close to Ohio State from a talent perspective? No. But on a given Saturday, can they win the game? Sure, they could upset Ohio State. But I think that even if they upset Ohio State head to head, they've got a lot of other issues on the schedule to deal with, like Iowa and Penn State and Michigan and whomever else they play from the Western Division.
They also get Cincinnati as well in the non-conference.
Yeah. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the Big Ten championship, but that'll be a great game.
If I'm a Miami Hurricane fan, I wouldn't take App State lightly.
I wouldn't either.
They're capable of being Power 5 teams. Just to ask the 2007 Michigan Wolverine team how that worked out.
Well, sure. That's been a while. I don't think App State has beaten a Power 5 team since. Well, no, they have. Hang on. To your point, they beat, that was 2 years ago, they beat South Carolina and North Carolina.
I'm saying Miami, you can enter Michigan State a 1-1 team or a 0-2 team. Or a
2-0 team. So they could be one of those.
Yep.
But most likely it's going to be a 1-1 team. But
I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State loses that game.
You're not going to be surprised if Michigan State loses to Miami?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to be surprised either. They're going to be a double-digit underdog.
Right. We've seen Michigan State, the underdog, do some big wins.
Yeah. That was not this Michigan State team.
Right. That's we had Connor Cook and all them. I think Penn State turns it around as well. So I think the East will come down to Penn State and Ohio State for the East.
I thought it was supposed to be Indiana.
Indiana as well.
Oh, okay.
There's about three.
All right.
3 teams. I forgot about Penn State.
Okay.
Because Penn State's going to be angry with what happened last year on that 2-point play.
I think that's a bit overrated, or a lot overrated, how mad teams are the next year. The revenge factor, I don't think means a whole lot most of the time. Sometimes. All right, MSU #1 fan. Anything else for me?
Nope. You got Mark.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
All right. See you, buddy.
All right. Welcome to the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports Sport. How are you doing today?
Hey, McD. I'm doing well. You got Texas on your mind, huh?
Yeah. So I saw the headline. I didn't. And I saw what the A&M athletic director said. Here's my opinion. The SEC, in my opinion, should want to take Texas and Oklahoma. They should. I actually think Texas would be served better if they go independent, though. I think that, as I said, I think I've said this before. I think Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas are really the only three programs that I feel like can stand alone independently. So, and Texas will go ahead. They'll schedule all the Power 5 Texas schools and Texas A&M, and then the other three in the state of Texas. They'll schedule the game Oklahoma. They'll play Arkansas every year, and then they'll figure out the rest of their schedule. So,
well, I think if you want to choose to be an independent, you got to be awfully confident in the resources you have and the ability to win big. Otherwise, you're going to be irrelevant. Notre Dame's relevant as an independent, and nobody else is. Nobody cares about BYU. Yeah, they had a big season last year. They had a top flight quarterback, and they did something last year to a certain extent to put themselves in the national spotlight. But otherwise, nobody cares about BYU. And when I say nobody, of course, people care. There are people somewhere that care. But I mean, most of college football nation. So if you become an independent, you're no longer affiliated with a conference, playing conference games where people that are zeroed in on that conference will take notice. You better be at the top of your game and competing nationally. Texas is not doing that now. They certainly have the ability. They've got the resources to do that. But we're talking about the SEC and Oklahoma and Texas. Now, my concern is that if this happens, what happens to the Big 12? Because they only have 10 teams now, so they're down to 8, and they lose their two best programs by far. It's not even close. Their two most substantial programs. Those other teams are going to have to find something that they're either going to have to add to, or they're going to have to leave and go to other conferences. And college football is going to become what? Ohio State, Clemson, and the SEC? Is that going to be everything? Like, wow. I guess with 12 teams in the playoff, then the SEC can fill up half the playoff spots, if not more.
Well, I disagree with you on a few points you made.
Okay.
I do agree. First of all, if this does happen in Texas and Oklahoma, well, really just Texas, I think if Texas just breaks off from the Big 12 to wherever they want to go to, I do think that will destroy the Big 12, and the Big 12 will split apart. I think every team except Kansas will find a way. Every athletic program except Kansas will find a way to get into one of the other conferences, whether that's the Big 10, the Pac-12, the SEC, or the ACC. I do disagree, however, that it's not just going to be Ohio State, Clemson, and the SEC if it happens, because as you know, NIL is in play now. You have a expansion of the playoffs. Talent's going to be broken up into a whole bunch of other colleges. If you look at some of these quarterback rooms at like Ohio State, Alabama, and all these position rooms, it's stacked 3-4 deep 4 and 5 stars. I don't think that's going to happen once the expansion of the playoffs and when NIL really starts coming into place. So I do think that the talent is going to be more spread out throughout the country.
Well, it hasn't yet. So that's your prediction. And I understand that logic, and I've said something close to the same thing, that it only makes sense that instead of going to a superpower program and sitting in line and being in that quarterback room, it's one thing to do that when there's no money on the line, but when there's money on the line, thinking that, well, I can go to Kansas State, or I can go to Stanford, or I can go fill in the blank and play for a mid-tier Power 5 team, hopefully become the starting quarterback or the starting whatever, and be on the field and make money, because basically you're not going to make money unless you're playing. Backups are going to have little ability to make money unless you live in a football crazed place. Pretty much anybody on the Alabama team, or again, there's a number of schools that could fit this bill, but they're limited, make money if you're not starting. So yes, you don't want to be the third stringer at Ohio State. You'd rather be the starter at Oklahoma State, and your face is out there and you can sign social media contracts and make NIL money. Yeah. So I follow that line of thinking. It is yet to play out that way yet. We'll have to wait and see, but it makes sense that that's going to spread out the talent. At the same time, that's still just going to spread out a little bit of the talent. But if this configuration comes into play, I don't know what these other teams in the Big Eight are going to do, because I call it the Big Eight because it's going to be a Big Eight then, because they're the lesser teams. You're going to have a concentration of all the money and all the power in the sport in one conference and with a couple other schools. And that's it. We think that college football is fragmented and focused on the SEC in the South now with just a couple other spots. Then it's really going to be focused on one conference.
And that's why I think it's not going to happen, because I think even if they have interest in it, I just feel like maybe not the SEC, I'm sure they'll love to be in that situation, but I think a bunch of other conference presidents would sit there and say, this will not be good for the sport or anything. So I personally don't think it will happen, but I just think I just wanted to come on and the one point I want to make about the whole realignment, because I do have a question. I want to get your take on something else. I just wanted to make the point that I think Texas will be better than independent, because I think they're actually in a better situation standing alone in an independent, at least for football, than being in a conference, if they want to take that route.
Okay.
So
did I miss something there?
Mark, I want to get your take.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to get your take on. I only listened to the ACC commissioner, the new commissioner, today. That's the only press conference I caught from the ACC media days today. Mm-hmm. What do you think about him saying that football it has to be number one in that conference? What do you think about him saying that?
I think he's being realistic. I think that's a very realistic and sensible statement to make.
And the reason why I ask that, Mark, is because, I think everybody agrees the ACC's Clemson and everybody else. I still think Florida State, I still think they are a premier program, even though it hasn't shown on the field the past few seasons. I know North Carolina, they're going to be preseason top 10, but, is that their ceiling, just being preseason top 10? And I'm sure there's a few other programs like the Virginia Techs of the world. Miami, I still think Miami's the type of program that can win a national championship and eventually maybe. But the reason I asked you that, Mark, is because when you said that, my question would be, then what are you going to do with the Syracuses of the world, the Dukes of the world, and other programs that haven't been good at college football in a long time? I mean, to me, I think Syracuse is a tough sell. Duke cares about basketball, but I actually think that's going to change a little bit with Coach K retiring after this year. I know all of a sudden you're seeing this David Cutcliffe is on the hot seat stuff because of him. I think it's because of him retiring after this year. But I think I don't know if the ACC can sell football at some of these programs. Unlike a SEC, minus Vanderbilt, or a Big Ten.
Okay, well, first off, to be a football conference, not everybody in the league needs to be great. You don't need everybody. You don't need all 14 schools. You need about 5 or 6 to be really good, and then you can be considered a football conference. And then secondly, not everybody can be good. They play conference games, and somebody's got to lose the game. So there are going to be automatically teams losing games and not competing for conference championships or looking good nationally with good records because they've got to lose games. South Carolina, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, at least those 4 are not good in the SEC.
Well, I would disagree that in the SEC, at least with that last point, I think 3 out of those 4 can be good. I know Vanderbilt, the academic part of it's pretty tough, but I mean, I've seen Arkansas in the top 10 before. Tennessee's won national championships. I think South Carolina. I mean, I know they've never really been good, but I've seen them in the top 10 before this decade.
But here's the deal, McD. I'm speaking of math as much as I am football. Yes, those schools have been good at football, well, 3 of them in the past, but if they become good, then they will become good in place of other teams that will then suddenly become bad. Kentucky will become bad, or Missouri will become bad, and a number of other teams that have been bad in the past, Ole Miss, will then become bad. Somebody's got to be bad. Not everybody can be good in any league, playing anything. If you took the 14 best football programs in the country and put them in one league, you're still going to come out with the same record in league play because somebody's got to lose the game. So they all can't succeed is what I'm saying. So you don't need all of them to succeed. If you get 5 or 6, is the Big Ten a football conference? Yeah. Is Illinois bad? Rutgers bad? Maryland bad? Sorry. Purdue bad? Yes, they're bad, but Ohio State's great. Michigan's been good. Penn State's good. Iowa's good. Wisconsin's good. So you got enough good teams that everybody looks at the Big Ten and says it's a football conference. Is the SEC a football conference? Yes. Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Georgia, Florida, Auburn. There you go. You don't need them all. So what can that be in the ACC? Well, it's definitely Clemson. North Carolina's on the move. Maybe Miami's on the move. Florida State's not necessarily on the move, but they've got all the potential to be because we've seen it for the last 40 years. Plus, they recruit in the best state in America. And so there's 4, and then maybe another program or 2. Maybe Louisville. I guess the most potential after those 4 would go to, well, Georgia Tech from a recruiting standpoint, North Carolina State from the way that they've played at times in the last 10 or 20 years, Pitt, maybe, Virginia Tech. Well, of course, Virginia Tech has been that type of program. So the ACC actually has a better opportunity from a recruiting standpoint than the Big Ten to be the second best conference in America because most of the conference is playing where the players are. The high school players.
Well, I won't hold that shot against Maryland against you, Mark.
Well, they've been bad. They've been bad for the last 10 years.
I know.
So
I can't defend
we'll
it.
see if that
I can't
changes.
defend it, but I just
got my
don't like
Maryland
talking
prediction
about it.
coming.
But I do think that the point I'm just trying to make, I think, is I don't think Syracuse will ever be good at football or Duke unless there's major wholesale changes. I even think with major wholesale changes, I think at best Syracuse is a 7-8 win program because of where they're located.
Again, the ACC
So how
can
are you
become
gonna
a
sell
football
that?
conference without Syracuse and without Duke. They can do it.
I know they can. I know
don't
they
need
can.
them. They just need them to show up on Saturday and get their brains beat in.
I mean, I just want to see like everybody have a shot at getting to a championship game in my lifetime, I guess.
Oh, that would be great. And I agree with you. And I know that you're pretty young, so but you've read up on these things. And if you go from about 1980 to about 1990, 95, sure, Miami was dominant, Nebraska, Florida State. But man, if you picked up a preseason magazine, you could go from year to year to year, and they would be totally different. The top 10 or 15 teams in the country be all over the place. All you have to do, we love the Big Ten. Take the Big Ten back in the 80s. Ohio State would win it, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, of course. All those teams would win the Big Ten. You'd have like 5 or 6 teams in contention for the Big Ten championship every year.
Yeah, I mean, in 20 years from now, it'll be instead of Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Clemson. It's like, I guess you'll call them the Big Four. Maybe Georgia is the Big Five. But they always seem to be contending as well. It'll be a different 5 or whatever.
Well,
even though
maybe.
At that point, at the pace we're going, it'll be a 64-team playoff like Mike Leach proposed today during his press conference.
I would love to hear him. So I crack up when I heard him say it again today. I thought this is phenomenal because it's just like the better team, the more the teams, the better. Let's 64. Has anybody ever asked him how that would work? What are we going to play, like an 8-game season?
I would think you have to at least take the season down from 12 to 10 games.
You actually only have to play 2 more weeks than you would with a 16-team playoff. So it could be done, but I just think that's ridiculous. What are we playing the regular season for then? You know, for as much as I love playoff expansion and believe in it, you know, there is a limit to it. Wonder who Alabama would have played last year. 1 versus 64. What?
I don't even know.
Like,
I guess. I mean, they don't even rank the 64th best team.
Alabama, Marshall. That's our first round game, and then it's Ohio State and UAB. And it's Clemson's playing, you know, Washington State. Yeah, that would be the 64 teams. It would be fascinating. I'd like to see it play out one year. Maybe one time we could do it. Of course, that's not going to happen, but
I think the most I want to see expand is probably 16. And I'm even against that. I think 8 teams line up 1 through 8, the best 8 teams. None of this conference. If you win your conference, it's an all-MAC block. I don't believe in divisions. Get rid of the divisions. And just have the top 2 teams face off in the conference championships and that conference, and then just line up 1 through 8 and play ball.
I'm good with that.
So.
All right, McD.
12 teams.
Anything else?
I just wanted to get my 2 cents about the Texas-Oklahoma.
Okay. I think we got about 7 cents out of you. All right, McD.
Always enjoy the conversation, Mark.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps.
Have a good one, man. All right, let's move it along because I would like to address the comment that's on the screen right now. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Marcus. Yakov 22.
Yakov, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well, Marco. First of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
I do have well, thank you. I do have a point or two I'd like to make. But before that, I just wanted to ask a quick question of you. You probably noticed that I do try to send in a super chat at least once a week or so, generally speaking, during your panel discussion with the three Ohio State beat writers. And generally, as you know, they're almost always football related. But what I wanted to ask you about that, I just want to clarify something to make sure I'm doing the right thing as far as the content of your show is concerned. For example, yesterday, Tony wasn't there 2 weeks ago. I jokingly suggested on my super chat that he was not there as a result of watching, intently Shark Week on Discovery Channel last week, which was on last week. And a couple weeks ago, I also made a joking comment, a little bit more football related, that asking if Steve Hellwagon was the young boy on the 1979 Coke Mean Joe Green commercial.
Yes.
And okay, well, obviously, I appreciate your laughter there. But what I wanted to make sure, Mark, is that I certainly respect your show. Then I just want to make sure that you maybe don't mind or maybe even appreciate an occasional funny comment, even if it's not exactly football related. And if you don't, would you prefer that I would send all future super chats and keep them more on the football / Ohio State if it's an Ohio State one, but keep them on to more football related content?
Not so ever. No.
Okay.
I have no issue with it. I don't think all those guys have remarkable sense of humor. They all can take a joke and they can all laugh at themselves. They can all take a joke and laugh at themselves. I hopefully can too. I think that's a good quality to have, to be able to laugh at yourself. You should have some level of self-dignity, but in general, you should be able to take a shot. And those are harmless barbs. It's nothing mean or nasty or ill-willed in any way. No, I didn't.
Oh, of course,
think twice about any.
Yeah, I respect you. Good. Okay. Well, then maybe I thought about it far more than you did.
Oh, you absolutely did, because I didn't think about it. I thought it was great. I thought it was funny.
Okay, good. Right. Well, maybe next week I'll try to send in a more football-related one, but just thought you guys would enjoy that. Well, I'm glad to clarify that, Mark. And again, I enjoy contributing to the channel, so I enjoy sending the super chat.
Well, thank you.
I guess what I wanted to ask you, Mark. Oh, you're welcome, of course, Mark. I actually want to ask you a quick question or two regarding scheduling. To see your thoughts on this, especially since now your topic today seems to be a little bit. I know that you always say you could speak about anything, but obviously Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC has to do with revenue. So I unfortunately have to work at home and have a lot of freedom to listen or watch something else as long as I do my work, and I often listen to The Fan, which is Columbus-based radio on the app. I'm too far to pick up on the radio, but on the app. And what they had a Ohio State beat writer who was a longtime beat writer for the Columbus Dispatch, who was saying that what he understands, the Big Ten. Now this was slightly before the playoff thing, where that's going to be the expanded playoff, where that may get rid of the divisions, although it's not necessarily going to change that anyway. He said that in order to increase revenue, the Big Ten is exploring a situation where they would allow you to play. They already play nine Big Ten games, where they will allow you to play a 10th Big Ten game. However, it would not count toward your Big Ten record. For example, well, I guess you don't need an example, but that they're allowing you to do that. And because, for example, you said that, let's just say Illinois, they might want to, they're looking for 3 out, they used to be 4, but now they're looking for 3 out of conference games. They may decide that this year they're playing Ohio State, but they may decide, and actually even if they were playing Ohio State, that to schedule an away game at Ohio State might potentially bring them more revenue than playing Illinois State at home or so. or they might think, hey, we'll support Ohio State, and even if our fans don't buy the tickets, their fans will.
Yep.
Well, perhaps Michigan fans or Penn State fans would do that. And I have to think that was a good idea. I was wondering if you ever heard of that, and if you had any thoughts about the idea of playing a 10th Big Ten game that doesn't actually count in the Big Ten standings.
Yes. So I have heard of it. And one of the reasons I've heard of it is because it's already being done. So this goes on and
Really?
has only happened a few times, but it's most recently happened just a couple of years ago and will happen again this year in the ACC. So between the likes of Wake Forest and between the likes of Wake Forest and North Carolina and a few of those North Carolina schools, it was decided that instead of Wake Forest picking up, and I'm just using Wake Forest as an example, there's been 3 or 4 teams involved in this a handful of times. And again, this is going to happen again this season. And I had to remind myself because I was going through my predictions and looking at the schedules and I was thinking, I recounted Wake Forest games a few times and I'm like, why are they playing more than, and then I was like, oh yeah, I know why. That it was decided, okay, Wake Forest can play somebody of interest in their region, in their state, that people will want to watch on TV, people will want to go to the games. And when we speak of Wake Forest, not to pick on them, but we're talking about a school that plays a decent level of football, but has a stadium of 50, 55,000 people that I've got to guess without looking at the numbers will be 15,000 seats empty a great majority of the time, especially if they're going to be playing East Carolina or UAB or somebody like that out of conference. So instead of playing somebody like that out of conference, why not play a more interesting game against a North Carolina? Because much like the SEC, Wake Forest plays in a division opposite North Carolina, and they only see North Carolina once every 6 years. So why not pick up that game once in a while? And they've done that a few times, and again here in 2021. So it's already being done again in a small pocket in the ACC. And I think that that's a credible way to look at scheduling, to say we can make our out-of-conference schedule, our quote-unquote out-of-conference schedule, even more attractive, impressive, for whatever reason, to bolster our schedule for a college football playoff appearance, or for money considerations, or just the attraction of having a better quality schedule. Because sometimes when you look at these home schedules for some of these teams, if they play a relatively weak conference schedule and maybe they're difficult non-conference games on the road, they must have a tough time selling ticket packages to their fans when they look at some of these schedules, and the out-of-conference games are a couple group of 5 teams at home,
right? That
they want to make it more attractive. And again, it's got more benefits than that. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay, well, that's great, Mark. I just learned something. I guess, I watch not as intently as you, but I do watch college football from morning to night for 30 plus years. I guess somehow that extra ACC, non-ACC game missed my attention. So, yeah, I guess it's not a novel idea by the Big Ten. So the second thing I'll ask Mark, and then I'll let you go here, is similar to you, I grew up in Ohio, but no longer living in the state. But nevertheless, I still remain somewhat, well, I don't know about this, you necessarily, but as far as me, I still remain somewhat Ohio/Midwest centric. And I've always, even though I have only attended a couple, I've actually always very much admired, say, MAC football, just because it reminds me of the part of the country I grew up in. I grew up in Canton, Ohio, and a lot of people go to those schools. A lot of people, Canton is a somewhat similar town to several of the towns that MAC schools are located in. So this was going back several years. Jim Tressel, who was the coach of Ohio State, made it a point to play at least, I think almost every year they played at least one MAC school every year. I think he advocates for them to play more. I have to look at the schedule and see how many times they played 2 MAC schools in a year. Or should say particularly Ohio-based MAC schools, be it Ohio State, it's Ohio, Toledo, Kent, Akron, or whichever, Miami of Ohio. And he said the reason they should do that is because he, as you know, he grew up in Ohio, was a long time Youngstown State coach, and he felt that to give those schools an away game, which was a payday, would be very valuable for those schools. And he really wanted to support Ohio-based MAC schools. And if I understand your background, I think you have some kind of connection to another MAC school. And now, again, that's when they had 4 out-of-conference games. Now they only have 3, so that's a little different. But I was just wondering if you would see a value to Ohio State perhaps dedicating 1, maybe even 2 out of their 3 out-of-conference games to play MAC schools at home. I'm Ohio-based MAC schools, and to try to help those schools, fill their coffers.
Okay. All right. This is what I think is that Ohio State, like other big-time schools, big-time powers, can't beat itself up by playing top-quality competition. So, of course, they play a Big Ten schedule. They can't go out and schedule Clemson, Oklahoma, and Washington. Of course, they need to warm up for the schedule in the Big Ten. So the benefit for them to play these other schools like MAC schools is, number one, it's going to guarantee a home date. They don't have to trade home and home series with those kind of schools. Number one. Number two is for the health of the football team, both from a physical standpoint and a mental and preparation standpoint for the bigger games.
Right.
But most of the benefit goes to the MAC schools in that. And I'm not going to guarantee this for sure, Yakov, but I believe I'm going to tweak to a certain extent your narrative there about Jim Tressel. So what actually happened, and maybe the Rod
Maybe you understand it better than me. Yeah.
So what happened here was, prior to the 1998 season, the Ohio legislature mandated that Ohio State would schedule, and maybe it happened before the 98 season. Maybe it started with the 98 season. Maybe it was mandated before that, obviously, because scheduling occurs well in advance. That starting in 1998, that Ohio State would have to play an Ohio team every year, an in-state opponent each season. And since the majority of the MAC, especially at that time, was located in the state of Ohio, pretty much like 3/4 of the league, practically, I'm slightly overstating it, was located in Ohio at that time. Basically, they were all MAC teams. And so what's ironic about that, Yakov, I don't know if you've heard this, is that in that first season of the mandate was 1998. And as you well know, Ohio State came within a sliver of a decimal point of playing in the BCS championship game that year as the number 3 team in the country. The reason that their ranking dropped just enough for them to be number 3 and not number 2 is because they played a 1-10 Toledo team and beat them 59-0. Had that been just a decent team, their BCS formula percentage points would have been better to lift them up to the 2 spot to play in the BCS championship game. So right out of the gate, it burned them. But if I'm not mistaken, unless that contract or that legislation is run out or been changed in the meantime, Ohio State plays an in-state school every year. And, we could go year to year and see if that's the case. They played Cincinnati in 19. They played, again, maybe it ran out at some point because they didn't play anybody in 18. But if you go from 1998 on, that's what the agreement was. Yeah, Toledo, Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Akron, Kent State, Bowling Green, Cincinnati, Miami of Ohio again, Cincinnati again, Akron, and Youngstown State in Ohio, Toledo. So I'm all the way up to 2010. Ohio again, Toledo and Akron, Miami of Ohio again in 2012. 2013, I don't see anyone. That was the first year that I don't see anyone. So from 1998 through 2012, they always played an Ohio school. So maybe that ran out or they fought it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad to know that Ohio State's doing their part in helping the budgets of various Ohio-based, particularly MAC-based schools.
And it picks right up
I
after
guess I
that.
should have looked at the schedule part. Yeah, I should have looked at the schedule a little more. I know that what I thought was I was coming on maybe playing 2 every year, but nevertheless, you've obviously shown they certainly play at least 1 for over 20 years, minus 1 or 2 years, so they've done their part. And yeah, well, Mark, I appreciate you updating my outlook on that. I attributed a little bit too much to Jim Tressel when really he was the Ohio legislator, I guess. So maybe I heard him reiterate that comment or emphasize that, but probably was prior to him being a coach. So appreciate him keeping it up, but I guess he had to do it anyway.
Well, it's actually a good topic that I can relay to our Ohio State panel because they may have more information in regards to that ending. But certainly that's a good topic.
Well,
I'll
be tuning in there, and maybe I'll even send in a super chat that is more football related for that particular one.
Keep up the barbs. Keep up the comic relief for us. You can take jabs at us anytime, Yakov.
Okay, thanks, Mark. It was a great call. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. All right. Next caller. And again, I apologize because I can't make out names or topics, and I don't even want to try based on the voice recognition. So welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark, it's DeAndre. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. What's going on, man?
All right, so we're going to start with Carolina, Miami. Heard y'all conversation about y'all saying they were the 2 best team, 2nd best team after Clemson, and I have brought up NC State.
That's what I said. Yes.
And I think the wholesome one made a comment. I don't know if Carolina State played last year. I can't remember. But anyway.
You can't remember what?
Miami. The Carolina and NC State played last year.
Yes. Carolina beat them by like 4 touchdowns.
Yeah. All right. Well, Miami with a 3rd string quarterback, that hostess said only lost by 10. I mean, I think it was 44, 42. I don't know. It was something like that. But I didn't think NC State's being overlooked this year, and I think they have a really good linebacking core and running back and a good quarterback if he's healthy. And like y'all say, NC State gets a chance to prove it on the field. I know a lot of people are not big Dave Squirm fans, but
I am.
I just really don't. Yeah, but I think NC State is the 2nd best team.
Athlon's
in the ACC.
Okay, my prediction is going to be coming out here soon. I'm releasing prediction videos, so I'll hit NC State. I've already got my numbers right in front of me, so I'm not going to let those go. But you will find out where I've got them. Athlon's has them number 38 in the country.
Right. So, and don't get me wrong, I'm probably just joking, but because Carolina's probably the 2nd best team. And I heard what you were saying, and this is what I try to tell Clemson fans, and I know you heard me talk about it. We got to watch North Carolina, because outside of Deshaun Watson's sophomore year and maybe a little bit in 1980, Clemson and Carolina has never been good at the same time. Because if you look at where Clemson get their talent from, if you look at Clemson, most of their talent comes from either Georgia or UNC. Not saying they haven't had good players like William Perry and Michael Dean Perry and Hopkins, where a lot of their players, best players, come from other states. So you got to watch when Carolina is good at the same time as Clemson, because Clemson and Carolina has never been good at the same time. Hey, you go back and look at the 70s, they've never been good at the same time. They have always, ran into each other's talent. So that's my point.
You don't think they were both
the guys?
You don't think they were both good around 1980, 81, 82 in that range?
No, 1980. I did say that.
Okay.
1980, Carolina was number 9 in the country.
Exactly.
I think Clemson was either 1 or 2.
Yes.
Yep. But that's the only year in Deshaun Watson's sophomore year. But outside of that, they're very, very rarely been good at the same time.
Okay.
And like I said, in the 70s, if you look at ACC in the 70s, it was Maryland and UNC. Clemson wasn't that good. Then when Clemson started coming up in 77, Carolina was still the better program. And then in the 80s, Clemson took off being the better program. So, yeah, they might have had a little overlap, but they've never been very good at the same time. I mean, most of those games are pretty much either Clemson blowing them out or the opposite way around. Even Clemson owns the series. Those games have never really been very good outside of what they had Deshaun Watson sophomore year. So answer me this: Who won the Heisman Trophy in 1977?
1977 would have been Earl Campbell.
Okay, so just a little. I don't know if you know this. Who was number 5?
Who was when?
In the Heisman voting. Who was number 5 in the Heisman
Number
voting?
5 in 77. Can you give me a hint?
HBCU.
He played in the ACC?
He played. No, HBCU. Historically Black colleges. HBCU.
Oh,
He played at HBCU college.
1977. Okay, so I've got to think of a really good player in the NFL a few years later. Did he have a nice NFL career? Yeah.
Historic.
1977. No, I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to 77. I'm going to say Doug Williams.
Yep. I was shocked when I learned about it.
He was 5th in the Heisman voting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just guessed Doug Williams because he was a rookie in 79 with Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Tampa Bay actually had a pretty good team that year. I was shocked.
Yeah, they went to the NFC Championship
that was
game.
a year after. Yeah, lost to the Rams. And Rams lost to the Steelers.
Doug Williams went like 2 for 15 in that game. They lost 9-0.
Okay. Wow. They had a real good. Was Deacon Jones still playing at that time?
Deacon Jones? No, that was past his time.
Yeah.
That Tampa Bay defense was Leroy Selman, Hugh Green. The Rams had Jack Youngblood and Rod Perry. Jackie Slater. Good call on the offensive line. I was thinking defense, but Wendell Tyler, Lawrence McCutcheon, Vince Ferragamo at quarterback.
Right. So I'm gonna move on. It was just a question. So when we talking about the most surprising teams to win the national championship or the luckiest. So I was talking to my friend when I told you about that gave me the information about Minnesota, helped me find the information about Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me to ask you this. So we all agree on Colorado in 91 or whenever they won it,
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State and Tennessee. So he asked me to ask you about Georgia in 1980.
Ohio State.
No, Georgia in 1980.
Okay.
As far as being luckiest.
Being lucky?
Well,
Yeah, they had a couple games that against Florida and Clemson.
Tennessee, first game of the year, 16-15.
Yep.
Ole Miss, 46-21.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me to ask you, do you think that's one of the luckiest national championships ever?
Well,
along with those three. I didn't see a lot of Georgia games at that time.
Well, yeah, I was watching those games. Not like I watched every play of every game, but I was the big game that they had that season was against Clemson. I think it was 26-21 or against Florida. I get them mixed up. They had a close game with Clemson and with Florida, but I think it was the Florida game. And you know how teams pass the ball back then. You know, if you were sitting at the 9-yard line with like a minute left in the game, forget it. And they were at their own 9. I might be off by a yard or two, so nobody call me out on this. They were roughly at their own 10-yard line with like a minute left in the game, and they threw a little hitch pass to Lindsey Scott, and he shook a defender, and he was off to the races for 90 yards to win the game. Otherwise, they would have lost to Florida. Like they were done. They were sunk. And
Yeah,
then,
I don't know what happened with the Tennessee game, but yeah, that's another game.
and that's also famous, that Tennessee game, for George Herschel Walker just pile driving Billy Bates. Remember Billy Bates played safety for the Cowboys?
Yes.
He was a really good special teams player and safety for the Cowboys. Well, Herschel Walker met him in the hole,
Yeah, number 40.
and
Yeah.
just blasted him. And Billy Bates could hit, he was a scrapper, but Herschel just caught him, just had all the momentum and just drove him back like, 5 yards. The other thing in that season was, again, because of the bowl matchups, Georgia was playing, I think Notre Dame was number 11 going into the Sugar Bowl. So they're playing the number 11 team in the country. It would have been nice for them to have played somebody else.
Right. Okay. So I was on my channel and I was talking about Georgia, and I asked, when was the last time Georgia won a big game? Like, I didn't know this, and people think I'll be joking, but Georgia hasn't won but one SEC championship in 15 years. And outside of Florida, Texas, and California, Georgia got the most concentrated talent of football talent in the country.
Yep.
So I said, how can that be? And when's the last time they won a big game? And some of the guys said Notre Dame. And I said, well, if we go back outside of this year, past year, Clemson and Alabama crushed Notre Dame every time they played them. Georgia struggled those 2 games with them. So I wondered, is it Kirby, or what do you think? I mean, is it Kirby overthinking himself, or they just snake bitten? You snake bitten until you're not snake bitten. I can remember how many times Clemson done lost.
DeAndre, when you get into a conversation like this with me, you know what I'm going to bring is the first thing I'm just going to ask. I need some perspective on this. I need some context to the question. You got to define a big game for me. When you say Georgia's not won any big games, what's a big game? Is winning the SEC championship game a big game?
Yeah, they beat Auburn, right?
They beat Auburn to win the SEC and go to the playoff. Is winning the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff, is that a big game?
Okay, that's 2.
Is beating Florida to win the SEC East to go to the championship game, is that a big game?
Now, this year, Florida's been down outside of this year, right?
Well, how far back are we going?
Well, I'm just talking about, let's say, the last 10 years.
The last 10 years.
Since Kirby got there. No, let's go with since Kirby got there.
Oh, well, that's only 16. That's only the last 5.
Okay.
Yeah, so in 2016 he went 8-5. So pretty much you can't say any of those games were big games. But he won a bowl game. But okay. In 2017, I'm considering in 2017 them going to Notre Dame and winning by 1 point. I would say that's a big game for a team that went to the national championship game. And I would say that beating Florida head-to-head that year, a Florida team that went to a New Year's Six game and finished in the top 10 in the country, is a big win. And I would say beating LSU in the SEC championship, or Auburn in the SEC championship game, is a big win. And winning the Rose Bowl over Oklahoma to get to the national championship game is a big game.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you Oklahoma.
Okay.
I mean, because the only reason why I say that, I don't know how good Auburn was. I know they got hot.
Well, regardless of how good anybody is,
was,
they're playing in the SEC championship game.
Right. Well, Colorado, Texas beat Colorado, what, 57-7 in the championship game? I don't know. I mean, yeah, okay, I'll give it to you. You're right. You're right. But I was just wondering, like, when was the last time they won a big game? But I just hear a lot of Georgia fans be like, okay, you know, close to play a weak ACC schedule. But then I'll be like, wait a minute. They're the only school in the country that go play two SEC schools. I mean, every year outside of the SEC. Does anybody screaming the ACC was weak? And I know we didn't have social media like we do now. When Florida State, and I know people will come back and say, well, they played Miami and Florida. But that's pretty much what similar to what Cooper does. They can't help that South Carolina sucks right now. And they can't help that when they take Auburn and Auburn sticks it up, or Texas A&M and they don't live up to their end. I mean, they went out of schedule programs that recruit at an elite level. So, I mean, I just don't know what people are asking for. Like, you know, Georgia fans are like, oh, we're going to beat Clemson to play the SEC. What does that got to do with anything? Clemson's going to be playing at the SEC school. Clemson doesn't beat, I did what they're 2-2 against Alabama.
Well, I have no problem with Clemson scheduling. I've never questioned or criticized Clemson's part in their schedule because, like you say, they go out and they schedule Texas A&M and Auburn, and they schedule a difficult opponent every year, and then they have to play South Carolina, so they can't help what South Carolina does. You know, they were scheduling those kind of games against, let's say, Georgia at the same time that South Carolina was winning 11 games 3 consecutive years. So then you're playing 2 really top-notch teams. So they're just in one of those situations like Oregon, well, where am I going? Louisville, Kentucky, Florida State, etc., where you've got an out-of-conference rival that you're just always going to play. And whether they're a 2-10 team or a 10-2 team, they're going to be good or not good. You can't control it, and you're going to play them because it's a rivalry. But South Carolina has been really good 7, 8, 9 years ago and really bad now. So, but even when they're good, they've got to play. They go out and play somebody else. They schedule somebody else. So I don't have any issue with Clemson and their approach to scheduling. I think they do a nice job of scheduling tough teams, but it's just, again, I don't think the ACC is that good. But that's not their fault.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you this. 2009, Alabama goes on this run, like, you know, complete dominance, if I'm not mistaken. That's when they started their dominance. So, my question to you is, with teams not updating their offense in the SEC, did that contribute to how Alabama dominated? Because when Clemson played Alabama and lost 46-40 to beat them the next year, Alabama started changing their offense, like upgrading their offense. And then you saw LSU do it, and they had LSU always have great skill players. How much did that? I know LSU beat Alabama 9-6 one year, but how much did that contribute to Alabama's success? Because Alabama seemed like the teams that will beat them, like they would lose one game, was like Texas A&M with the spread, Johnny Manziel, Kevin Sullivan throwing around, Ole Miss. Like I said, they lost to LSU, but that was like, you know, like punching each other in the face the whole game. So how much did that contribute to Alabama coming to this machine that they are?
I've heard Nick Saban talk about it. I heard him talk about it again today. I think it has a lot to do with it. He doesn't like to point to losses and say that changed his mind. He just talks about, well, it was easy to see this is the way college football is being played now, and if you want to keep up, then you better get a quarterback who can throw it around and space the teams out and play up tempo and again put your playmakers in space and throw the ball. And he talked
Right.
about Lane Kiffin being the guy that was able to look at what he did to his credit. Again, I haven't heard him talk about the Clemson games or the Johnny Manziel games, but today he did bring up Ole Miss beating them twice in a row, that Ole Miss was doing a lot of things on offense that they copied. And Nick Saban flat out said he hired Lane Kiffin and said, look at what Ole Miss did to us the last 2 years. Can you incorporate some of that stuff into what we do?
Right. And I forgot about Auburn. Auburn, I know, well, Clemson offense is a cousin of Auburn's offense because of Gus Razan and Chad Morris's relationship. So that's what I was saying, because I think Auburn got him twice too, and Nick Marshall, who was a converted quarterback to a quarterback, you know, he beat Nick Saban a few times too.
Three times.
But so a couple of weeks ago, you asked me about pick a year about a national championship, and you might, when you get a chance, you'll look at it.
Yep.
So 1977.
Okay.
That's the one I think I'll ask you for whenever you get a chance. I know you're busy. Because that was very interesting to me. I didn't even go look at it because I wanted to wait and see what you had to say about it. And I think anybody go look at that year. Like, everybody got one off. Who in the world? How do you pick? I think it was with Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Texas, and Penn State.
Notre Dame beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl.
And who beat Oklahoma that year? Nebraska?
77. Who did beat Oklahoma? Oklahoma in 77. Was that the year that they beat? That was the year. I'm getting 77 and 78 confused. There was a year that Oklahoma and Nebraska actually played back to back. They played to end the regular season, then they played in the Orange Bowl, and they split.
Okay. Guess who was number 5 in the country that year? Number 6. Who was number 6 in the country that year?
Hang on just a second. Or was that the year that Oklahoma, they lost to somebody, then they just annihilated Arkansas in the Orange Bowl? Number 6 in the country. So it's obviously going to be some kind of shocking team in 77.
Yes. Take a wild guess.
Well, I can remember all the bowl games from 77, but who would have finished number 6? Shoot, I'm going to kick myself when I can't answer it here. Just give it to me.
Kentucky.
Oh, Kentucky in 77. Yeah, that was the last time that they beat. No, it wasn't. I was going to say it was the last time they beat Florida. No, they beat them in 84.
That's true.
Huh. Yeah,
Kentucky
so I
think I got a little mixed. Well, Notre Dame finished 1. Alabama finished 2. Arkansas 11. Texas 11-1. Penn State 11-1. So I'm wrong. Kentucky was 10-1, but then you went to Oklahoma, who was 10-2. Pitt 9-2-1. Michigan 10-2. And so this will go back to why I have an issue with rankings. How is Washington number 10 in the nation, but Ohio State, Nebraska, and Florida State got less losses? Florida State only lost 2 games that year. San Diego State only lost 1 game that year. I don't understand how Washington finished ahead of them.
Well, what happened that year was Washington won the Rose Bowl over Michigan, 27-20. Warren Moon at quarterback. Ohio State lost the Sugar Bowl to Alabama, so that was obviously a pretty tough assignment in the Sugar Bowl. Who was the other team?
Nebraska. Nebraska was 9-3.
I don't remember who they played in 77. I think that was the year that Oklahoma just killed Lou Holtz and Arkansas in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah. So
Okay, you want me to sort out 1977? Okay.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
I'll tackle 1977. I love doing those. I am in the middle of doing prediction videos, so I got 65 to do. I've only done like 6. And I got to edit all these.
No, take your time. Take your time.
I'll get to it as soon as possible. All right.
Yeah, take your time. I was just wondering. So that's all I'm about to ask you about. Oh man, I had all these questions for you earlier today. I might have put it on Twitter. That was probably about it. But like I said, I think Carolina. Real talk. I think Carolina is the second best team in the ACC. And as a matter of fact, when you got 10 offensive linemen that all played and have experience and started at some point in time, you got to think they're gonna be really good. My problem with Carolina is, we're gonna find out how good that defense is, because I think they gave up to 45 points to Wake Forest this year. I'll let you go after this, but have you ever seen the amount of talented, I ain't gonna say talented, but the depth of quarterback play in the ACC this year? I know because of these Super 7, Super Seniors and stuff like that, but if we have a quarterback, he might be decent. They might have a chance to shock some people. Like if you're gonna look at the top 5, top 6 or 7 quarterbacks in the country, at least 4 of them in the ACC: Hal, DJ, King, and the kid out of Boston College.
Mm-hmm. Jerkovic.
Yep. And the guy, if the guy at Florida State can get back to his old ways, you got another one.
Yeah.
And if Pitt, the quarterback at Pitt ever get it together, which I don't think he will, I mean, he might be pretty good too. I mean, that's a lot of talented quarterbacks. So, and we haven't. I forgot about Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman is a pretty good quarterback. He ran Jamie Newman off.
Yeah, he's good.
To Georgia.
Yeah, Hartman's good.
So,
and like you mentioned, who did you just bring up? That's pretty good. Oh, the
Pitt quarterback.
No, not just Pickett, but Devin Leary at North Carolina State.
Oh yeah. That's why I say, if we're gonna look at how State was playing, now Mississippi State gonna tell us a lot, but look how State was playing before he got hurt. Like I said, I don't know if he got hurt before the Carolina game. If that running game with those linebackers come to play and he plays well and they return the top 3 receivers, I mean, I think State has a pretty good chance to shot some teams this year. Hopefully it's not Clemson. The State has a tradition of beating Clemson when Clemson is really, really good. At least give them a heck of a scare. So 88, 89, and 87, Clemson was ranked in the top 10, and State beat them all 3 years, 2007.
All right, DeAndre.
Clemson was really good, and State beat them.
I think we'll move it on. Thank you so much for the call, man.
All right.
I appreciate it. All right. I am quite a bit behind here in the live chat. So before I take the next call, I wanted to address this comment. So my guy Joey here, he's probably long gone at this point. He posted this forever ago. He's saying that Oklahoma in the SEC, Oklahoma would be 10-2 most years, 11-1 sometimes, and 12-0 once every 10 years. So basically, that's averaging out to almost 11 wins per year in the SEC. I don't know if Oklahoma's actually, I do know Oklahoma has not matched that in the Big 12 in the last 10 years. If you want to average out those numbers and send Oklahoma to the big, like if they're going to the SEC, I will take the under on Oklahoma's win total against that. If that's what can be expected of Oklahoma and their results in the SEC, I will take the under. Absolutely. All right. I believe we've got, we've got all sorts of calls coming in now. I think we're leading off with George, I believe.
Is it my turn?
It is your turn, George. Fire away.
Oh my God, I love it. It's I'm looking at the chat, watching you live. When I hear that, I'm never sure. All right, so Mark,
Yes.
has anybody ever proven that you don't have to win your conference and you can still win the national title? Has
Yes.
anybody ever not won their conference and won the national title?
Yes.
Who did that?
Here we go. Alabama 2017. It was only 3 years ago.
Well, that's cool, huh?
So,
Isn't it great?
what's your point?
That you asked me the other day what matters more, like this conference or that conference or a national championship. I said national championship's all that matters. You don't even have to win your conference. Just like only lose one game and then slip in there and beat them all. Yeah, I love this.
If you're
I'm
Alabama.
tired. You can't resist progress.
Nobody
Right.
else
Or
has
Florida.
been able to do that necessarily, but Alabama.
Florida lost the last game of the year once to Florida State, and then we beat them for the national title. Isn't that funny?
Yep, that was in 1996.
Was that 96?
Yes.
I'm getting so old, Mark. I'm 61 years old. I thought it was 86. I'm starting to think like an old person, like as if I have a right to say it was 96.
Started
Okay. It was just yesterday.
Yep, that was in 96. Florida beat Alabama in the SEC championship game in between. But yeah, that was a little
Hey,
revenge.
what would you do
Yep.
if the Georgia What would you do if the Georgia Booster Club called you tomorrow and said, "Listen, we've been watching your show. We know you have a good feel for college football. We're going to file Kirby. Who should we hire?" Just fantasize. Like, think about it. Who would be a good fit for Georgia so
A
they
good
could give us a
fit.
good game?
Well, who's
Yeah.
just a good coach would be Matt Campbell.
I mean, my God, they have 85
Luke Fickell.
5-stars. I
There's two.
would have hired Urban Meyer if I was him, but
Well, he's a little busy right now.
Georgia should have gave Urban Meyer like $4 million a year to be their coach, or $8 million, whatever the going rate is.
I think they're happy with Kirby.
How can you lose? How can you lose with all them players? They have like every player we wish we had on our team, and they lose to South Carolina. This is so hilarious. Uncle Lou has made a living off of this. He's the luckiest man that ever lived
He's
making
the one.
Georgia videos.
He's the one.
Huh?
He's the luckiest one.
You should
He's
go.
the guy.
Listen, when I'm feeling down and feeling blue, I go and watch Uncle Lou videos after they lost to Florida, and then I feel better about everything, you know. Uncle Lou's like, God damn, I hate Georgia so bad. How can you screw this up?
Well, I
And
do
then I feel
think
better about
think
myself.
that you're going to have to be watching old videos for a while.
My dad said you can't make yourself look good by making someone else look bad, but that's not true. Because every time I watch a Georgia football video, I'm like, yes, I can. You get that right. My dad said you can't make yourself better by making someone else look bad, but yes, you can. If you hate Georgia and you make fun of their coach and their players.
I don't know. This might be your last chance to do that. I don't know.
Right
After
now,
this
listen,
season.
if I would have asked you the same question, about Florida, who would you hire to replace Dan Mullen? The answer would be nobody. If we fire Dan Mullen and give him like an $8 million buyout, you know what would happen? We would rehire him because there's no one else better.
No one better than Dan
That
Mullen.
would be we will set a precedent. We're going to fire him, give him the buyout, and then hire him back because there's no one else to hire. He's the best there ever was.
George,
Hey, listen,
it's sometimes
he has a chance to beat. He has a chance to beat Nick Saban's record. He's young.
Nick Saban's record of what?
National titles.
Dan Mullen.
He's young. Over the next 15 years, he could do that.
Well, yeah, he could win 7 consecutive national championships and tie Nick Saban. That's not going to happen.
All right, enough about football. Enough about
football.
Me and all the viewers and the people in the chat section, we want to get inside your head a little bit and find out about the psyche of Mark Rogers.
Okay.
We have a question.
This should be fascinating. Yeah.
We have a question.
Uh-huh.
We have a question. Do you feel sorry for Michigan fans?
No, I don't feel sorry for Michigan fans. I don't feel sorry for anybody rooting for college football games.
I kind of feel sorry for them.
No, I don't feel sorry for them. No.
No, it's looking pretty bad up there, man.
They can change teams. They can always decide to jump ship if they want.
That's a good point. I agree. That's what I try to tell the FSU fans. You don't have to suffer. You can just go buy some Gator gear or Miami gear, you know. Although, in all honesty, we're all hoping Milton is a stud, right? Just to make college football fun again. Like, who's this Florida State team that's won 6 games, you know?
6? Just 6?
No, when we get to that point, you're going to be like, they're 6-0, you know? Like, oh, my God, it's looking good. All they have to do is beat Notre Dame, and it's on. I hate Florida State, and I hope they beat Notre Dame and win the next 5 games, you know?
Yeah. We got to force Notre Dame to join a conference. That's what has to happen there. And I apologize to everybody out there that I didn't post the phone number, so it's right there now.
If anybody will have this super conference shit's not going to work out, Mark. It's not going to work out if you put Oklahoma, Texas, and these people in the SEC.
I hate
There's only so many spots at the top. There's only so many champions. We're all going to go 5-5 if we keep this up, you know. And then finally Oregon will get in the playoff because we all beat each other's ass all year, you know.
Yeah, can you imagine that SEC schedule? It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Your first game is Texas A&M, and your second game is Texas, and your third game is Oklahoma, and your fourth game is Georgia, and then you have a letdown. You play Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, right?
It's going to be rough. Plus, once you got 16 teams, you don't see half these teams for 6 or 7 years.
It's crazy. It's
that
mad,
just can't happen. If that happens, then we know what we already do know, and that's that money rules everything.
If that happens, Florida is going to transfer to the Pac-12. We'll play in the Pac-12. Fuck this. We don't need this shit, you know?
Well, they've got the Pac-12 connection there with you.
I want to play Oregon State and Oregon every year, and Washington, and Colorado, and Arizona.
Yeah, see,
ridiculous.
That's what I want to see. I want to see what does the SEC just not care about the rest of college football, which I get it, but they need the rest of college football. They need some competition out there. What are these other teams? What are the other conferences going to do? What are the leftover teams in the Big 8 going to do? The Big 8's either going to have to scarf up some decent teams to survive, or they're all going to disband and run somewhere.
Right.
Into the Big 10 and the Pac-12.
They all need to join. They need to join the Pac-12. Like, we can't absorb any more teams. We already got enough. Like, go make some other conference.
Well, so those teams are going to run to the Pac-12, most of them. Maybe some of them to the Big 10. Iowa State can go to the Big 10. But where's the ACC going to go for teams? The ACC is going to be next to that SEC with 16 teams with Oklahoma and Texas. The ACC is going to be...
They're done.
Maybe
this is a problem.
West Virginia.
It's a problem. Man, I miss the good old days. It was all so simple back then.
Yeah, you want the bowl games back. All right, George, I'm going to move on to these other calls because they're stacking up here.
Yes, I do want the bowl games back. All right, talk to you later.
See ya. All right. This is the one caller ID voice recognition that does come through, and it's always from Mr. David Greenshield. I see it very clearly on the screen. David Greenshield, college football. David, welcome to the show.
The man that gives college football its voice, Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, David. How's it going tonight?
Well, I listened to you on the Steve Dace podcast the other day, and more college football brain power in one room should not be allowed.
Yeah,
I just have to say that, by the way.
It is overwhelming.
Yes, indeed it is. It's almost, I tell you what, I want to feel sorry for Steve Dace as a Michigan fan, and then I think about it for a second, and I can never feel sorry for a Michigan fan. Just to answer George's question, too, by the way. That program kind of ruined my childhood and my high school years, so I'm not going to ever shed a tear for them.
Exactly,
and ruin
David.
Two of the best Ohio State teams I've ever seen, so I'm never going to feel sorry for them. So
if you're ever tempted to go in that direction, just find the 1995, 96, or 93 games on YouTube.
Thank you. Yes, Rose Bowls and national championships lost in all those games. So need I say more? So wanted to talk a little bit about what you guys got into in the preview. By the way, you guys ever thought about doing like more of a collaborative effort, Mark? You know, kind of coming up with your own like Phil Steele version of college football kind of preview on your own? I think you guys would do a good job with that.
Well, I appreciate that. I've had a few people in particular this offseason say, why don't you come out with a preview magazine? But my goodness, I would love to do that, but I would want to do a great job with it. I just don't want to throw something out there. And I got my Phil Steele magazine about a week ago, and I was just reminded of how, now, you know, that's one direction to take it. If you are not into reading stories and reading kind of a perspective on the season, but you just want information just as condensed as it possibly can be, that's what that is. That'll give you as much information as possibly can be packed into whatever 350 pages, because it is intense. See, I would be somewhere in the middle, because if you pick up an Athlon's or a Lindy's, I would want to put a little bit more information than they do. You know, I'll read through a particular, like, they'll put things in there I don't need to read. Like, I don't need 4 paragraphs just to get me to the offense that just state things that anybody who's got a pulse and knows anything about college football already knows, and that information is already contained by looking at the schedule or the results from last season. And then once they get to the offense, they outline some things, and then the last sentence or two basically just tell you that there are 3 starters along the offensive line, and Jim Smith's the best offensive lineman coming back.
Right.
So I would be somewhere in the middle.
Okay. I mean, I love Phil Steele, by the way. I've been reading him since the 90s, and the thing that I like about him is kind of that in-depth analysis he does with like his position group breakdown, you know, in the rankings that he does, which I think is just awesome. By the way, any chance to get him back during the season, Mark, for like on like a weekly basis? Is there any possibility of that down the road?
Actually, I don't know if you had a chance to see. We had him on live, and we had audio issues.
Right.
And unfortunately, they dialed in the wrong number, but that's beside the point. So there were audio issues, but they were very nice to say that once Phil goes through his current obligations, that we can have him back in August.
Okay.
But
that's
in terms
cool.
of in season, I don't know. I'll give that a shot.
Be nice. I mean, if it's a possibility, you know, maybe kind of handicap some of the games. That'd be interesting. No offense to Steve Merrill, he does a good job, but you know, it would be nice to have Phil Steele on if he could. So just you know, as a thought. All right, I want to get into the preview that you had with Dave because I have a few bones to pick, and I want to go over a few things with you.
Okay.
First of all, I've got to say, I think we're going to be in agreement on a couple things. Although, let me go to the first thing that I disagree with Dave on. I am a little bit more bullish on Oklahoma coming into this season than he is. Are you?
I have not completed my predictions. Yes and no. I've completed all the regular season predictions. I've got them right in front of me. I'm in the process of producing videos and releasing them, so I don't want to give away too much that in terms of Oklahoma and the rest of the Big 12. I don't think, and we'll see it play out, I don't think that Oklahoma is on the same level completely as the other four.
Okay, and I could see that. Although I still think because Georgia has to go through the SEC, there could still be a path for Oklahoma to still win their conference and make the playoff. So that's where, as we've seen in the past. My thing with Oklahoma, and maybe I'm buying Rattler a little bit more than Dace is, and I'm also buying the fact that Alex Grinch, former Buckeye defensive coach, and I believe, Mark, what do they have, 9, 10 starters coming back on defense, if I'm not mistaken?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe, and I know this is a stretch, though I'm going to put it out there. Maybe I'm buying the fact that Oklahoma's starting to play defense. I know, knock me over with a feather, but, they were playing much better defense towards the end of the year, and they do have the starters coming back. So I'm not saying that they're going to be lights out, but could they no longer be the sieve on defense that they've been in the past? And then I'm also banking on the fact of Rattler to have a very good year. Now, I know Dace had mentioned the fact that, Oklahoma's been disappointing in the past. Now, he pointed out some of the Stoops years. I think Lincoln Riley's just a better coach. And Lincoln Riley, when it comes to, quarterback development, his track record, well, it speaks for itself. I mean, it's been awesome, obviously. So, that's why I'm just bottom line a little bit more bullish on them, and at least a believer that they can win the conference and make the playoff.
I
don't know
think
what your thoughts are on that.
I think that people need to be somewhat careful when they start to cite past results and to relate them to what's going on today. Because you can go backwards 5 years, and with some programs, it's basically the same program. Obviously, Alabama and Clemson are the same programs today, generally, not to a T, but generally with the same head coach in play and performing at the same level, recruiting the same players, all that as they were 5 years ago. Ohio State, despite the change in head coaches, same program that it was 5 years ago. Obviously, things change, but I'm talking in fairly specific generalities. Florida State, much different program today than it was 5 years ago. So it depends. So,
Right.
I heard on one of the media days today, them citing Boise State. They were talking about Brian Harsin. They were talking about Boise State, and they're pulling scores from 2006, beating Oklahoma. He wasn't even around. And, and how Boise State was competing at the national level, beating Georgia. Well, that game was in 2007, they're, and so
Sure.
you have to kind of be careful doing that. Okay. So with Oklahoma playing defense, I think you're correct in that the Oklahoma teams of the Baker Mayfield years, for example, were on a national stage, in a sense, coming out with the same results or near the same results as that Oklahoma team from last year or the year before. But those were being achieved 48-45 every week. If you look at Oklahoma's defensive statistics, they were atrocious. Well, that Oklahoma team last year was good on defense. Now they've taken they've taken a pretty good leap, because now they're not giving up 48 points to Texas Tech. They're giving up 17, and they're putting together, again, really good top 15 type defensive metrics. But my question is, and I'll use Clemson as an example. Clemson in 2018, of course, had a dominant defense. They held Tua and that group to 16 points. You know, they held
Sure.
Notre Dame to a field goal in the playoff game. Now, Clemson statistically is this past season was on par, the last 2 seasons actually, on par statistically within the ACC, that being the bulk of the games they play, as that great 2018 defense. But once they got
Right.
in the circle with LSU and Ohio State, they got torched. So that's what I'm wondering about Oklahoma.
Sure.
I know they're improved against decent competition, against the TCUs of the world, but I question whether they're ready for Ohio State or Alabama type offense in a playoff game.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I'm not saying they're the 85 Bears here or something, Mark.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just saying that they can be, and especially in the air raid offense days, I'm just saying that they're not, that they could be improved enough to where they don't, score 40 plus points in a playoff game like they did in 17 and 18 and lose those games.
Yep.
Because that's
my question.
That's what obviously happened.
I'm right there with you.
Year.
Yeah. Are they going to go to a playoff game against Clemson, Ohio State, or Alabama and lose by giving up 45 points, 48 points like they would have 3 or 4 years ago, or LSU 63 points? Or is their defense improved enough, and this is significant, to win those games 42-35 and hold them down just another 10 to 12 points, another 2 scores better on defense against elite competition to win playoff games?
See, the only thing with Georgia, and I am bullish on Georgia, although I will say this, I put my hand on the Georgia stove a couple of years ago. They were actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were Mark Rogers' preseason pick to win the national championship in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, not going into the season.
Yes.
Yes. I would say this. The bottom line with Georgia is simple. I still have to see it from the quarterback position. I still have to see JT Daniels be a top-tier quarterback and him do it. If he can come out and do it against the Clemson defense early in the year, because I think Clemson's defense is going to be really good. I mean, I think that we talked about it before. They could have the best defensive line in the country coming into the season, although I think the Buckeyes could be right up there, especially with the 3 or 4 defensive ends that we've got that can rush the passer. So, I want to see him do it against that type of defense before I'm just all in on Georgia again. Because, I mean, obviously it's going to take the play at the quarterback position for them to get to where they want to get. So that's my only, kind of, concern as far as that goes. But that's been there for the last few years for them. I'll say this, Mark. I want to get to a team that you have your doubts on, and I think I have my doubts on, and that's Indiana. Now, could you see Indiana being basically what? Remember how people were kind of bullish on Minnesota coming into last year after the 2019? They go 11-2, and then they just totally fall back to the pack. Is that? I mean, because Indiana did a little bit of a COVID year. They caught some teams, having down years. I'm just wondering, could you see that parallel? Maybe them falling back, much like Minnesota did a year ago.
So Minnesota went 3-4, so it's difficult to put that in perspective of a full season, but it sounds like 5-7, 6-6. That's what it is, basically,
right,
based on percentages. I would be a bit surprised if Indiana fell back that far, but fall back to 8-4 and lose 3 games in the Big Ten? Absolutely.
Yeah. I could see an 8-4, 7-5. And now I know the Buckeyes got to go there. And Penix, looked good at times last year. He really did, and obviously played, pretty well against Ohio State. Although, I think Ohio State's secondary had a lot of issues last year, and that turned out to be the case. Obviously, totally buried out in the championship game, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think that could be a game, but I don't know. I just think that Indiana is a team that could fall back. Now, I am buying, and you're buying that Penn State's going to be improved this year, correct? I could see Penn State having a bounce back year. I think that early game against Auburn is going to be really interesting. I think the Big Ten, especially with the Auburn coming up there, new coach, I'm still not sold on Nix, and he's going to be a better quarterback. with Harsin than he was with Malzahn. I think Penn State's got a chance to make a statement in that game. I would love to see them get that win. Maybe show a little Big Ten pride here. You think could be a good barometer for the season for them, that game?
I think it's a good barometer. It's probably not going to be as good a barometer as it would be most years against Auburn. I don't think Auburn's a top 15 team in the country. Most people are forecasting them to barely go 500, maybe 4-4, 3-5 in the SEC, and like 6-6. It's interesting, since I've got an Athlons magazine sitting in front of me, that you kind of play that game of if you have a publication that just gives you record results in terms of predictions and not game by game, you kind of piece it together in terms of what they're projecting happens in the non-conference games. And they're basically, this is pretty much of a snapshot of how they feel the SEC stacks up against the Big Ten. They have Penn State at 9-3 and going 7-2 in the Big Ten. So they're a pretty heavy player in the Big Ten. Well, that one loss is obviously a non-conference loss, 7-2, 9-3. And then if you go flip to Auburn, they've got Auburn winning that Penn State game as a team that's only going to go 3-5 in the SEC.
Sure. Well, here's the thing, Mark. Franklin actually, I thought in 2019 overachieved. Because I didn't remember that team. I didn't expect them to go 11-2 that year. Kind of in the post after his better teams. The McSorley, Barkley teams, which were kind of his better, supposed to be, were really his better teams from 16 to 18. For them to go 11-2 that year, I think he did a pretty good job with that team. So I would not be surprised to see them bounce back this year. They had that. I think that loss at Indiana last year in a game that they clearly blew kind of set a bad tone for their season. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they had to catch Ohio State the next week, and I think after that, I think it just totally, the rest of the season was just, and with the players that they lost, losing their best defensive player, the running back,
absolutely,
all of that. I mean,
I agree with all that. If you really break down their game against Indiana, sure, they lost. They lost fair and square. Credit Indiana. We know that statistics are to a certain extent are for losers, and Penn State blew that game, and Indiana made the plays that they did. But Penn State could have won that game about 18 different times. Like, they statistically dominated that game. Like, it was a 3-1 yardage advantage. It was a ridiculous time of possession advantage. They could have won it by, I had it more imprinted in my memory at the time. But in addition to the running back, I think it was Kevontae Lee needing to, take a spill inside the 5-yard line, and then they could have been in great shape. There were like 6 other things that happened in the final couple of minutes of that game where, again, credit Indiana made the plays, but Penn State outplayed them most of the game on the road. Okay. And then, of course, that call at the pylon could have been called either way. That game could have been like, oh, nope, he hit the ground before, ball hit the ground before it hit the pylon, game over, Penn State won. It was that close. It was, how many times that play was reviewed, and nobody could totally figure out what happened there. So they could have easily been 1-0. And then they're playing what turned out to be the second best team in the country, and they got outclassed clearly, but it wasn't a blowout. They hung in there, and it was a 2-score game, and they were never really in it after about mid-second quarter, but they didn't get annihilated, and they took a shot at it, and they made the Buckeyes a little uneasy in the second half a couple times. And like you say, at that point, boom, you're 0-2, and to their credit and to James Franklin's credit, they rallied the final 4 games, and can't remember exactly who they beat. I know they beat Michigan and probably a Rutgers win in there. I know they lost to Nebraska of all teams. Whomever they beat.
Yeah, that was a bad loss
along the way. Again, I know it was Michigan, and probably Rutgers and maybe Michigan State, whomever they beat. Well, it was no murderer's row, but they won 4 consecutive games when they could have just completely mailed it in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think a 9. If they beat Auburn, a 9-3. I'm saying, I mean, a 10-2 could still even be a possibility out there. I think, you know, a 9-3 is definitely, I think, a probable. I wanted to get to the SEC, Mark. I have a thought here. I was going to throw this out there. I know a lot of people are bullish on Texas A&M coming into this year, and I'm just wondering how much of that is a little bit of fool's gold. I mean, did they benefit from having an experienced quarterback last year, a COVID year, you know, less games? I just wonder if that's a team that maybe we're overrating a little bit coming into the season.
Oh,
and my thought is, good.
No, go right ahead, David. Finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say, if I was doing rankings right now, Mark, I might rank LSU as the second best team in that division.
See, that's what I'm wrestling with.
Right.
That's what I'm wrestling with. Because you may have heard me state this, because I've probably said it 10 times, that it's easy, and I've purchased, you know, 3 or 4 of these preseason publications, and it's easy to do, and I've fallen into this trap as well, is just to basically take what we saw last year and just think it's going to duplicate and tweak it a little bit, you know, and think that, okay, there are some teams with an upward trend, like a Penn State. Okay, they're not that bad. They're better than that. And to do some minor adjustments like that. But generally, to almost repeat last season and really not be able to see who's going to break out and who's in serious decline, who's going to fall off and who's going to, because I've cited this stat a few times in going through the preseason magazines, that I went through 3 consecutive seasons. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't do it to last year because the records just don't match in the number of games played. But for 3 consecutive years, I tallied how many teams in Power 5 football either increased their win total by at least 3 games or it decreased by at least 3 games. You know, how many 9-3 teams sunk to 6-6 or below? How many 4-8 teams jumped to 7-5 or better? I just randomly chose 3 games, as it just felt like that's significant. 3 games, at least 3 games. And it was to my surprise that in 3 consecutive years, at least 19 to 23 teams in the Power 5 had that kind of a difference from one year to another. You know, Minnesota 2 years ago went from 6-6 to 10-2. There were 5 teams last. You got to go back to 2019 again because of the lack of games last year. 2019, 5 out of the 14 teams in the Big Ten either increased or decreased their win totals by at least 3 games from the year before. And I think most of us are afraid to try to find those teams and make some what seems like a ridiculous prediction. But it happens all over the place. So who are those teams going to be?
Well, the one thing I was going to say, and maybe, you know, Texas A&M's past performance in the SEC kind of clouds my judgment, because other than, you know, what the one big year that they had with the Johnny Manziel Heisman winning year, you know, which I think is their only 10-plus win season other than last season in the SEC.
Yeah.
And I know they've been recruiting at a really high level, and they paid Jimbo Fisher a boatload of dough. I get all that. The only thing that I'm thinking is just I think they may have caught a perfect storm last year. That's to have that type of season is what I'm saying. I think LSU, and that's what I said. I'm thinking about picking LSU as the second best team in that division. This is an interesting year for them because I heard some rumblings after they had won that national title. Are they just the 2010 version of Auburn? You know, that one year where you catch the generational quarterback and you win the national title and have a dream season, and then you regress after that. I think that last year kind of was the perfect storm in the opposite way for them, So I'm banking on them to have a bounce back year this year. I'm not saying, I'm saying at least they get back to that kind of where they were 2018, 2017 kind of level, that 10-2, 9-3 kind of season is where I'm at with them.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you're leaning in that direction for them, but they do have a fair amount of starters coming back, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Yes, they do. And my other question, I should say, not my only question about Texas A&M is, and I temper this because for most teams, especially with the limited season last year, it's difficult to find quality wins. What do you really consider a quality win? Well, Texas A&M only beat 2 teams over 500 last year. They beat Florida at home on a last-second field goal, and they beat Auburn, who was 6-5. Those were the only 2 teams that they beat that were over 500 until the bowl game. They beat North Carolina, who was seriously compromised.
Yeah. And North Carolina was in that game until the very end. It took that game was tied with 5 or 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
Even with North Carolina being down players. So. Well, as always, a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers. You have yourself a great evening.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
You take care now.
You too. All right. We picked up a few more calls here. Who do we have on the line? Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Yeah, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes. Got you loud and clear.
Yeah. Well, I was going to talk about the 1984 college football season, but considering I was born in 1990, I think I'll pass on that. No, but really, I was going to talk about obviously the big story of the day, the Oklahoma, Texas. Will they not go to the SEC?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's important to kind of break down the mathematics. According to SEC rules, at least 75% of the current members must vote in the affirmative to allow members in.
Yeah,
which
I saw that.
By my math would mean 11 of 14. I don't see Oklahoma and Texas getting 11 votes. I think, I've heard that a lot of good reports that Missouri and Texas A&M are hard-nosed already. Vanderbilt kind of operates under a different mindset from the other members. I think the fact that Oklahoma is not a member of the Association of Academic Universities, it's Association of American Universities, the AAU. I think Vanderbilt would be a no on this.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard concerns regarding Arkansas, LSU, and even with the playoff expanding to 12 teams and having a little more margin for error, if you allow Oklahoma and Texas into the Southeastern Conference and you realign the divisions, I would imagine that Auburn and Alabama are moving to the Eastern Division, and I'm wondering how much Florida and Georgia would like that. So, I'm not saying it's 100% they can't get the 11 votes, but I think it's less than 50% that they can get the 11 votes to muster that. But in the hypothetical scenario that they did get the 11 votes, then I'm thinking, well, what would the remaining Big 12 teams do? I think the Big 10 would expand to 16, and I think that they would take Kansas and Iowa State on the basis that out of the remaining 8 teams, only 2 of them are AAU members, and they are Kansas and Iowa State. And, the presidents are the ones that are going to be casting these votes on these type of decisions. And so I think those teams would move to the Big 10. So then you got 6 teams left. I do think West Virginia to the ACC is definitely probable, and maybe potentially even Notre Dame full-time membership into the ACC is a possibility. So then you got 5 teams left, and then probably 4 of those 5 are going to go to the Pac-12, and then one of those Big 12 schools is going to be in a little bit of a hurting. And but I don't know, that's how I see the mathematical breakdown of all this. And I don't know, I'm just curious what maybe your thoughts are of what I've kind of said so far.
Yeah. So here's to extend on your first point is when I jumped on here tonight, I didn't have any time to prep this. I had been recording all afternoon, and I heard about this maybe at like 5:30 in the afternoon, and I had some personal business, and then I was doing a live show from 6 all the way up near the time that we started this. So all I knew, there's a rumor out there that there's been contact made by Oklahoma and Texas to reach out to the SEC. So I kind of just read it on here first run. But my initial thought was, like you, I did pick up on that 75% vote. And I thought, okay, yes, Vandy, you can almost separate them from the rest of the SEC in how they view football and athletics and their academics. Not that the other schools aren't fine institutions academically, but Vandy, they have no football powerhouse type rabid fan base type mentality to maintain or hold on to. Their academics are just as important to them, if not more so, than the play on the field. So why would they lessen their academic standing by bringing in other football powers in to beat up on them? So I discounted Vandy as you did. I also looked at the 2 geographically close schools, Arkansas and Missouri. Well, Missouri fled the Big 12 for SEC money and prestige. And why would they give that up in their same area of the country? Why wouldn't they keep that prestige of being an SEC team sitting in what you could say is the Midwest, and have Oklahoma and Texas take that away from them and then be on the outskirts of SEC territory, and Oklahoma and Texas kind of squash them? That they can hold that over in terms of recruiting, at least, and in other ways they can hold that over Oklahoma and Texas as, hey, we're a member and a pretty competitive member of the SEC. And Arkansas, the same thing. Why would they want to be overrun by Oklahoma and Texas? And they already have been in previous decades by Texas as a member of the Southwest Conference. Well, they got away from Texas. They joined a far better conference, and they've been a member of the SEC, and a mostly in the last decade struggling member of the SEC, but still, why do they want to be overrun by Oklahoma and Texas? It's already the most lucrative conference in the country in terms of bringing football revenue into along with the Big Ten per school. All right. So I thought of those 3 right away. And really, any school that's not performing well in football, why bring in Oklahoma and Texas just to beat you down and make you even more significant? Mississippi State. Yeah. I think
Mississippi State would play those 2 teams every year.
Yeah, I would think that this is more a benefit to the league office and the overall SEC to say, let's take the power grab of 2 of the top roughly 10 programs in the country and the land grab, and we're just going to squash everyone and be even more so the dominant conference in college football. But from the individual school perspective, I would think, do we really want to just get engulfed by this? We're really going to be insignificant if we're Mississippi State or Vanderbilt or Missouri or the schools that I mentioned and others. The way Tennessee's performing on the field, they're going to be just another school. And really, it's more about Alabama and Georgia, and LSU can still hold their heads high above water and say, we can handle it. But the rest of the league, I just don't see what's in it for them, except for I don't know what the dollar ramifications would be. They must be on the positive side. But the SEC doesn't need those two
Right.
schools for sure.
And I think if I'm looking at it from Oklahoma and Texas's point of view, I think it's probably a safe bet, especially with the revenue loss after the SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 pandemic, that they're going to be looking for ways to bring in more revenue to college football. So I think they are going to expand that playoff to 12 teams. So probably most years in the Big 12, I would say at least 2 teams are going to get in, and maybe some years 3, if it's a good year, 3 teams get in. And so if you're Oklahoma and Texas, especially if you're Oklahoma right now, I don't see any performance-based incentive to want to leave the Big 12 right now, especially with all the roadmaps and pathways that will be detailed for, the playoff that's going to be expanding. And then I also kind of thought about this, from a monetary standpoint, Missouri, Texas A&M, they're doing a little bit better now. And Nebraska, Colorado's doing worse. I'm just thinking of the 4 that left the Big 12. But from a sports performance standpoint, Missouri had a couple good years, but they've had some really down years. You could maybe make an argument Texas A&M's been a little bit up, but they've certainly had some rugged years. Nebraska's been, I think, a dumpster fire for their standards in the Big Ten. And I'm not really convinced that Colorado's really improved their standing since leaving the Big 12. So I guess the argument I'm making is I'm not sure the evidence is really that compelling that if Texas and Oklahoma left, that there's going to be greener pastures for them, especially performance-wise.
Not performance-wise. Financially, again, they're going to have to crunch the numbers, and some of it's speculative, but most of it they probably can actually go to. Just like if you do a budget at home, that the house payment's a set amount every month. But on the other end of the spectrum, entertainment can be whatever you want it to be. But then somewhere in the middle is your water bill and your electric bill, which based on how you manage those things, you can keep it in some kind of range. And they're going to do the same things on both ends, whether that be the Oklahoma, Texas end or the SEC end, to figure out, does this help us? Can we project this helping us or hurting us? But we know that in basketball, the NCAA tournament has become, for the average sports fan, everything. The regular season means nothing. Now, of course, there's a college basketball contingent out there that loves watching every game. But for the average sports fan, it's all about March Madness. Well, college football is not going to get anywhere close to that, but it is going to move closer to that with this 12-team playoff, where the regular season is going to be, not for me or the college football fan, minimized, but for the average sports fan, it's going to be more like, can't wait for this 12-team playoff. Let's watch this 12-team playoff in December and January. And because of that, what you just said makes total sense. That why doesn't Oklahoma, and if Texas would ever get its act together, just sit in the Big 12 and say, you know what, even though we get somewhat ignored during the regular season and the SEC is watched more and certain teams in the Big 10 watched more, all you have to do is look at the TV ratings. It's all about the 12-team playoff. And this ensures that we're going to make it almost every year. We can even go 9-3 and have a chance to get in, but 10-2, we're good. We're going to be there. And then we'll show up at the playoff and we're significant and we're relevant and we're going to make the playoff, as opposed to going into the SEC, picking up a significantly more difficult conference schedule. Then I guess we're still going to make the playoffs. I don't know. It's going to be a lot more difficult. And the playoff is going to be where most of the money is too. I don't know how it's going to be distributed, but it may be distributed just like it always has been. And Ohio State obviously represents the Big Ten all the time in the playoff and just brings back all the money for the conference to split. So it may not matter. You can be Indiana and still say, oh, we still get all the money Ohio State earns us every year. So I don't know how it's going to be split, but that seems to be how the conference is. I think the SEC does it more from the standpoint of you make a percentage of your own money and then you share a percentage of the money. So it's a little bit of both worlds. And I think that makes sense. You're a conference member, but you shouldn't just be able to kick back and make the money that Ohio State or Alabama make you every year. It's a little bit of both in the SEC, from what I understand.
And I guess, this should be kind of even if this is just like speculation and it turns out to be nothing, or if it goes to a vote and, nothing happens. I mean, this should be a little bit of a wake-up call for the Big 12. I do think that Bob Bowlesby is a better commissioner now than Dan Beebe was when, since I'm a Cyclone fan, I've been really paying attention to all this for years. And then, the Big 12 was in like 10, 11 years ago. I do think we have better leadership. But, I kind of have, I'll just kind of float this idea, like, from like a business perspective. I don't think that a lot of the games the Big 12 has, like on ESPN Plus, I really don't think that's going to cut it. I really think the Big 12 needs to step up on that front. So I was thinking, if I'm correct, the SEC, like, deal with CBS for football ends after the 2023 season. So if I were Bob Bowlesby, I would try to get on the phone with CBS. Not only try to get a deal where, one, Big 12 football and men's basketball game was nationally televised on CBS every week, but I think the Big 12 could offer something that the SEC couldn't. And so the Big 12 doesn't have any like official conference network. I really think that if the Big 12 like partnered with, for instance, the CBS Sports Network, and I looked this up, and when people get cable, the availability for people to get the CBS Sports Network is, from the data I've looked at, on par with Big Ten Network, SEC Network, things like this. And I don't know. I think it'd be wise for the Big 12 to partner with a group that's reputable, but also doesn't have like a partnership with another conference already. Like, I wouldn't want to form a network with ESPN because of the partnerships with the SEC and ACC, or Fox with the Big Ten. I think the Pac-12 made a business mistake by just trying to launch it willy-nilly on their own. I think you got to work with somebody who's reputable. So anyway, I'm just kind of floating that idea out, and I just, I wonder maybe what your thoughts are of that idea.
So starting with the Big 12 and CBS. So that's a great thought. The only thing I question there is, the Big 12's in a situation right now where they still have a contract with the ESPN ABC networks. So you'll see certain games that the Big 12 does. I don't know what the pecking order is, for example, but obviously Fox is invested heavily in the Big 10, number one, and then the Pac-12 and the Big 12 in some order. But those two conferences, the Pac-12 and the Big 12, seem to be playing, for lack of a better term, second fiddle to the Big 10, where the Big 10, Fox gives preference to the Big 10, and for good reason. The TV ratings are better, and those games are almost always going to be exclusive. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, pretty much, Wisconsin maybe. So the Big 10, so you're moved to CBS, who's void of a big contract, and football games on Saturday would be good. I don't know what kind of agreement they made with Fox in terms of, okay, when does that contract end, and what games are they giving Fox? Because we might be dealing with leftover games, a lot of Texas Tech, TCU kind of games that would go to CBS, but at least they'd be on their own network. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of questions to be
Yeah,
answered there, but it's worth the inquiry.
And the idea would be like how the SEC had it, where ideally, if I could make the logistics of it work, I would want like the Big 12 like game of the week to be nationally televised on CBS. Now, whether I can get there tomorrow or I have to wait a few years for that, I think it's important for the Big 12 if they're wanting to really focus on survivability. I think they got to think, a little long term here. And, I just see a potential business opening for the Big 12 if you explore the CBS option, especially since you can offer like a sort of a pseudo or maybe even a complete conference network partnering with like the CBS Sports Network or maybe there's like they create a new network specifically for the Big 12 through the Columbia Broadcasting company.
I
for
think the
CBS.
other thing I think the other thing that you're saying that's of great value is that to the average sports fan, they don't understand or don't try to keep up with all these TV contracts and who belongs to who and where can I find the Big Ten versus the SEC. But what was very clear and has been clear since the early to mid 90s when the contract was first signed was that the SEC is on CBS. Sure, the SEC has contracts with ESPN, and their second and third games or their third and fourth games would be on, ESPN at 6:00 in the afternoon and 3:30 on ABC. They would have some other ABC and ESPN affiliated games on their second and third and fourth tiers, but that main game and sometimes a doubleheader, the best game and sometimes the second best game were linked to CBS, and your average sports fan knew that. Like the other contracts are so, Big Ten games are all over the place. They're on ESPN, they're on Fox, they're on all the ESPN networks. Those were confusing to people, but the connection between the SEC and CBS was entrenched in people's minds. And what you're attempting to do here would be the same thing for the Big 12 to be able to establish with CBS that nobody else would have.
Correct. And like, for instance, people think NBC, they're like, oh, well, Notre Dame's playing at home.
Yep.
I want to, I want to be able to kind of establish that sort of image or brand for the Big 12. And I just really think it's important for the Big 12 to, I think they got to beef up their business savvy here because having a lot of the games, especially like, even if they're not like super great games to the average fan, but like just like having any games like on ESPN Plus, I really don't think that's a good business model long term.
Yeah.
So
well, again, they can take their
that.
lead. They can take their lead from what the SEC is doing with ESPN right now. ESPN still gets really good games from the SEC, but not the best games. That are still committed to CBS through whatever it is 2 years from now. But it's been outlined by the commissioner of the SEC that once that contract is over, then all the premier games go to some combination of ESPN and ABC, which is the same thing that the Big 12 could sell along your plan to CBS would be, we're tied down by this contract. And so we're going to have to work around this contract for 3 more years or whatever the length of the contract. But once we cut loose, we can announce now that the Big 12 championship game and the Oklahoma, Texas game and all the premier games are going to be on CBS. But right now we'll give you what we can. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's worth researching for that conference. And hopefully somebody's smart enough over there to be thinking in that direction.
Well, and I'm just a hack when it comes to this stuff. So I mean, if I'm thinking of this, I would hope that the commissioner would have a whole lot more of a detailed plan than I just kind of came up with off the top of my head. But that's just This is my thought on that. I did have one more thing I kind of wanted to talk about, before I, move on. But so you said you haven't filled out your preview yet, and I've seen a lot of the previews for the Big 12, and I'm just saying this as an objective Big 12 fan.
Yeah.
And I think Oklahoma fans would agree with me. So, like, the quarterback that, like, we have to face this year that, like, scares me the most actually isn't Spencer Rattler, because, you know Rattler is good. You know what caliber of player he is. You're going to get up for that, And I've seen this team, the quarterback on this team and his team, getting a lot of disrespect in the preseason stuff. The quarterback that scares me the most to go up against as a Cyclone fan in the Big 12 this year is Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson, it seems like every big game, he's up for it. He plays big. He gets big wins. So I see all these people like say, and as a Cyclone fan, it was really fun. Now Thompson was injured on this game last year. It was really fun for me to see us beat Kansas State 45-0 last year. But I'm seeing some of these predictions like, K-State's going to go like 4-8 or 5-7, or you look at the home road balance of their schedule this year. I see an 8-4 football team this year, and I see I'm just floating that thought out there when you're making your predictions.
Oh, they're
the quarterback.
They're right there. I'm showing them in front of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
They just have yet to be produced, except for I did about 5 teams. I've released about 5 videos, but I'm done with the record predictions. They're already signed and sealed. They're Kansas State. I'm looking right at them. Okay.
I just cringe when I see people saying K-State's going to go 4-8 or 3-9, 5-7. I just cringe at that, because as a Cyclone fan, I know that K-State is a very proud fan base, and they don't like to go down easy. And they've had a quarterback that's won a lot of big games for them. And I think if you talk to Oklahoma fans, they would be in total agreement with the thought I'm, saying right now. So I just wanted to say that, because I've seen a lot of things in, those predictions.
Sure.
Now I'm not saying they're going to go to the Big 12 championship game or the playoff or anything, but
big game meaning that he's beaten Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Well, he beat him twice.
Yeah.
Thompson.
So that's the big game you're talking about. He's won a lot of big games. He's beaten Oklahoma twice.
Well, and I mean, he's always put. Now, Iowa State wasn't maybe at the level a couple of years ago that they're perceived at right now. But I'll tell you, every time Iowa State's gone up against Skylar Thompson, he's played great. So, I mean, I expect that he'll play great against Iowa State too. I mean, so I just see a quarterback that whenever there's a big game, he plays big, and
we appreciate the call.
That's scary. And yep. Have a good night, Mark.
You have a good night. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. All right, we better get these calls in. They're going like 30 minutes at a time. I am too kind. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we've got to wrap this up soon. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? Hello?
This Kevin Dallas.
I think we just lost Kevin because I didn't hear him. All right. Kevin can call back. We're going to go with our next call. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Elite CFB Talks, and I think I called in about 2 weeks ago about power conferences.
Okay.
And it pretty much sounds like the SEC is about to be the first one to do it, or they're beating out 2 teams from the SEC.
Yeah, I think I remember this call, but Certainly, this is something that many people predicted like 10 or 11 years ago when all that expansion was going on with Nebraska and Missouri and Texas A&M and all those teams, Colorado, moving around, that there would be 16 team conferences. So people forecasted it 10 years ago. Maybe it's just taken 10 years for it to unfold.
But just back off from like that. I'm mostly calling in for Texas and OU wanting to join the SEC. It just, in my opinion, what I've already, A&M and Missouri already said hell no to Texas joining the SEC, because Texas A&M does not want Texas in there because they're pretty much going to bully them again. But they want to be the only team from the SEC to. Texas A&M wants to be the only team from the SEC to say, look at us, we're in the SEC. We don't have Texas with us anymore. They pretty much want them to stay in the Big 12. But what it's pretty much coming out to is Texas and OU are pretty much tomorrow. I'm calling it right now. Tomorrow, I don't know what time, but OU and Texas are going to go up to the Big 12 and say, we're gone, we're done. Now, like, we want out. They're going to leave the Big 12. They're either going Pac-12 or SEC.
So you think that the Oklahoma and Texas, if they cannot get into the SEC, would rather be in the Pac-12 than the Big 12?
Yes, I think they would.
Why?
They would be more. It's money wise. The Big 12, it's in a way, it's kind of like a joke. They're a joke conference in a way. They're still Power 5, but they're kind of like a joke conference. Because either way, if Oklahoma goes undefeated this year, but say they lose one game to Kansas State, they won't be ranked number 1. They'd be ranked number 4. Because it's a weak conference. The only team that's really kind of in a way carrying the Big 12 now these days is Oklahoma and Texas. And if Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, that's going to be a big loss for the Big 12. And the Big 12, they won't be a Power 5 conference anymore because they don't have another school to back them up with like talent-wise. No, not talent-wise, but like staying consistent, like be able to be a playoff team. They won't have that anymore. And I think this is whenever it's going to open up a wide open doors to where I think maybe if that does come true, that Texas and Oklahoma's out, I could probably see Nebraska coming back to the Big 12 and then the Big 10 going after Cincinnati, but then the ACC going off to get UCF. I think that's what's just going to – I think the SEC is about to just set off another whirlwind with a 16-team conference to where it's going to start this mega conference deal where what I talked about 2 weeks ago.
So right now, the Big 12 is producing more revenue in football than the Pac-12. So I don't know that the Big 12 is that much of a joke compared to the Pac-12. So the Pac-12 is producing the least amount of revenue in football. The Big 12, though, is down, as is the ACC. The Big 10 and the SEC are far above the other 3 conferences in producing revenue. Okay, to your point,
but the reason why
if Oklahoma and Texas would leave the Big 12 and join forces with USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, and the better teams in the Pac-12, then maybe they've got a fighting chance against the SEC to build that into something. What I would want to know if I was Oklahoma or Texas, is I would have to have a serious sales pitch given to me by the Pac-12 to determine whether my new conference is going to be run legitimately. Now, they, of course, have a new conference commissioner in the Pac-12. That was a surprising choice, but Larry Scott is no longer running the Pac-12. So I would want to hear from the Pac-12, why is this going to be a great sports conference and a huge football conference? Why are we going to be making the right moves in the future to be legitimate and to be credible, as opposed to what's been happening in the Pac-12 over the last 7 or 8 years? I wouldn't just jump ship and say, I'm going to join the Pac-12.
Texas, they have all the money in the world. And if Texas and Oklahoma say they jump off to the SEC or Pac-12, the Pac-12 is kind of like the joke of the Power Five. But if this does happen and say the Pac-12 somehow happenly get Oklahoma and Texas, they probably, in a way, shoot up to the second best Power Five team behind the SEC. But if the SEC gets Texas and Oklahoma with the 12, with the expansion of the playoffs and the NIL, it would be, no one could contend with the SEC anymore. It would just be SEC dominance for years and years to come.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What you're stating is pretty obvious. Yes. Yes. If Oklahoma and Texas go to the SEC is already the best conference. It's going to be by far the best conference. It's maybe already by far the best conference. What I'm saying is that if I'm in charge at Oklahoma or Texas, I'm just not running to the Pac-12 just because I think the Big 12 is a dying ship, a sinking ship, and I need to run somewhere, and I'm going to go to the Pac-12 because there's a couple big football brands there. I would just need to be proven. I understand that Texas has all the money in the world and Oklahoma is a big football power, and they bring a ton to the Pac-12. They would make the Pac-12 significantly better. They might be the two best programs automatically in the conference. Maybe. Certainly Oklahoma would be. What I'm just simply stating is the Pac-12 has not been run well as a sports conference in general, but specifically as a football conference. So if I'm Oklahoma or Texas, I need to know, Pac-12, what is your plan? You have a horrible TV network that's a disaster. What are we doing about that? What are we going to do about all these things? Scheduling of games. What are we going to do about our television contracts? What are we going to do about this horrible television network? Because these things need to be fixed. I'm not just coming here because Oregon and USC are here. Because otherwise, the Big Ten will take Texas and Oklahoma. Possibly. I would think that they would.
I don't see them going to the Big Ten. They would not go to the Big Ten. That's too far up north. And that would not be a good fit for them.
I don't necessarily know that the Pac-12 is a good fit. If I'm Texas, I'd rather go to the Big Ten and play in a legitimate football league that's made the right moves, that makes twice as much money, more than twice as much money per team than the Pac-12, and just run to the Pac-12, because neither one of them geographically make any sense. And Ohio State's already going to Texas and pulling players out of Texas. So there's some value there. And Penn State is as well. So you already have two schools in the Big Ten that I know of that are pulling players out of Texas, and really nobody in the Pac-12 is doing that. Maybe Oregon.
But 10 years, I think it was like 10 years. Texas said, this is before they got their Longhorn network and everything they wanted. They said, fine, them, we're going to the Pac-12. They decided to use that as an excuse to get what they wanted. But I'm not saying that they would join the Pac-12, but I think the SEC is their number one option right now. Secondary is probably going to be the Pac-12, but their eyes are to the SEC. And I would not be shocked if tomorrow, probably like around 12 or 2:30 or just some oddly time, this will be the last year Texas and Oklahoma's in the Big 12.
Could be. That'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. If they join the SEC again, there'll be a mad scramble on both the conference part and the individual programs part, because nobody wants to be left out. It's horrible to be that conference that's left out, because then you're crumbling. And of course, the Big 12 would be the one that's crumbling, and then the individual schools would be scrambling to be relevant and
Mhm.
Schools like
But then
Texas Tech comes to mind
I
as
also
being
heard
in trouble. Texas Tech would be in trouble. TCU, to a lesser extent. Texas
Baylor.
Tech seems like they would be, Texas Tech and Baylor. Kansas has a basketball program, depending on how much the Big Ten would value basketball, to pull in Kansas.
Well, I also heard something saying if they do get, or if they're really trying to get Texas and Oklahoma, I also heard that Auburn and Vanderbilt will be cut loose and be gone. But this is where I bring in why they would cut Auburn and Vanderbilt, because Texas, they're a football school, a baseball school, but they have great academics. They'd probably replace Vanderbilt. Oklahoma would replace Auburn. Oklahoma has a great football, a decent basketball, or not an okay basketball school, but they're like top up there. I think if this is really going to happen and they just want to stay with 14 teams, I think Vanderbilt and Auburn would be cut loose. And this is whenever you bring in Alabama, I think Saban would not give two flips about Auburn getting cut. He wouldn't really care. He wants the competition, and I think Oklahoma and Texas will bring the competition, but A&M would hate it if they did join.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your perspective. That would be fascinating. And then you would think Auburn would flee to the ACC, would be the logical move there. All right. Thank you so much for the call. Good stuff.
All right, bye.
All right. Quite a day in college football. We didn't even talk about Bobby Bowden. That's probably the most important news of the day, of course. But if you want some very poignant, moving, and insightful analysis, and just, I won't call it analysis, thoughts about Bobby Bowden, then check in with our Florida State show that we just posted, went live with at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Tremendous conversation we had with big game James Coleman, who played for Bobby Bowden from 2002 to 2005 and has kept in touch with him and spoken with him many times at fundraising events and the like since his playing days at Florida State. So just a fascinating call there. Not going to take any more calls. I've been on all day and so much to do, so much to edit. Unfortunately, my editor's been gone for 6 weeks or so. So I've been editing till 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning every day just to keep content on these team channels. And we've got so much to do. I do want to highlight this real quick, everybody. Please stay with me for just a second. And remember my vow, my plea, my guarantee to launch a 24-hour live stream to kick off the college football season. So remember that. We'll be here for 24 consecutive live hours leading into the college football season. That should be a whole lot of fun. And then, you know, many of you have seen this. Check it out. It's just a masterful work of art here. If I can find it. Where is it? Right there. So that was put together by the fine folks at tristatesketch.com. tristatesketch.com. And if you buy one, you get one free. So if they can do that for me, and actually I did not ask for that, they pulled that together and offered that up to me and are sending it this way. So I appreciate the fine folks at tristatesketch.com. What you get to do is you send them a photo, which again, I didn't have to do. This was really just very nice of them to do for me. But send them a photo, and then you pick out your canvas or your display of choice. There's a number on the website that you can choose from. And if you buy one, you get one free if you drop my name. So drop my name. Mark Rogers sent me, Voice of College Football. And you buy one, you get one free there at tristatesketch.com. All right, we'll have more from the SEC, the Big Ten Media Days tomorrow. May have a special report coming in from Greg Peterson from Husker Online, who's going to report from the Big Ten for us. And it should be another crazy day of college football. I appreciate having a lot of people on the line tonight. We topped out around 220, something in that range. I think people are getting fired up for college football. I've got so many prediction videos to get into. I'm going to have to be recording those as well. So we will get to that. Again, the prediction videos, I've only done about 5. I released TCU, Oregon, Virginia, also Michigan State, and that's about it. But we've got to get the rest of those done, those prediction videos. All right. Otherwise, we'll be back here. Actually, our typical 2 Miami live streams, one we did today, the other one's canceled. So no Miami live streams tomorrow. You'll just have to hang tight to see if we go live at all tomorrow, but we'll be back on Friday with Oklahoma Sooners live at 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central. Great to have everyone here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for your support. And again, check out the sketches at tristatesketch.com. Amazon link. Please grab that. If you shop Amazon, use the link that we provide in the description section of any of the videos. You don't have to what am I trying to say here? Use the link. Same shopping experience. Don't have to spend an extra penny by using the link that I provide. But it's just like going into Amazon the way you do it right now. But if you use our link, then we get a little bit of credit, but it doesn't cost you a penny. And we know that people are on Amazon every day. Visit voiceofcollegefootball.com. So this is quite interesting here. We've got some good products at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Let's see if I've got any of them saved. Not, unfortunately, on this program. But anyway, it's voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the page and you see where it says store. Click on that. Go nuts. See what kind of gear you want for the upcoming college football season. Also, if you would like to write for us, you'll see a tab at the top of the screen at voiceofcollegefootball.com. If you would like to write for us on our website, just go to write for us. See, if you would like to write for us, then you click on write for us. See how that works? And you can fill out the form there, and we will take it from there. We have a ton of exciting things planned for this college football season, so look out. The Voice of College Football is rolling thanks to you, not thanks to me. I'm doing the same thing I've always done, is just trying to bust my tail and talk college football all the time with you. But thanks to you, we are rolling, and we've got a lot of great plans lined up for this college football season to make your Saturday experience even far better than what it's been talking to this knucklehead multiple times during a college football Saturday. Right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you next time. Keep those notifications rolling so you know when we're going live and dropping new content.